Bonnie Lee Dages was an 18-year-old from Lithia, Florida. She loved horses and had a 4.5-month-old son, Jeremy. On April 28, 1993, she and her son came home from getting her van cleaned. Bonnie then told her roommates she and Jeremy were going out. They were never seen again. I'm Ed Densel, and this is Unfound. Follow the money. You've probably heard the saying. It got into our lexicon from one of my top 10 films of all time, All the President's Men. The story of how Woodward and Bernstein worked through a maze of lies and campaign finance paperwork to bring down President Nixon. The ironic part? In real life, Deep Throat, the confidential informant, never used that line. A screenwriter came up with it as a way to explain to moviegoers what Robert Redford and Dustin Hoffman would be doing in the film. Hey, Hollywood never allows the facts to get in the way of a good story. The funny thing about money, though, is that it doesn't seem to be a popular motivator for people to go missing. And rarely following the money will get us where we need to go in solving a disappearance. We know the main reasons for these cases: relationships, drugs, jealousy, to cover up some other type of crime. Money, not so much, although there are exceptions. The recently solved Mike Williams case, for example. Yet today, we possibly have one of these unique cases, although you're going to hear about other, more standard possibilities. But it doesn't involve a lawyer or doctor or pro athlete or someone who just hit Powerball. You know, someone who usually has money to spare. Instead, we have Bonnie Dages, who just turned 18. Her son was not even 5 months old. She was a nanny. Yet you're going to hear about money. A lot of it. Can we be the Woodwards and Bernsteins for Bonnie's family and work through the maze to solve this disappearance? And now, summary of the case. This is brought to you by my friend Megan Good's site, charleyproject.org. Bonnie Dages was an outgoing, popular girl who was the oldest of 5. She grew up in strawberry country east of Tampa, the kind of area where it wasn't unusual to see kids walking along the back roads at night. But Bonnie's life got complicated in 1992. She got pregnant and decided to keep the baby and be the best mother she could. Once her son Jeremy was born, she got a job as a live-in nanny just down the street from her parents' house. She completed her GED, and Bonnie seemed to have gotten a handle on things. The future wouldn't be easy, but everything seemed to be under control. Furthermore, in March 1993, she received an inheritance of $50,000 upon turning 18. But she didn't splurge. She bought a $2,500 minivan and put the rest in the bank. So, on April 28, 1993, she was out and about with her son. They even had time to stop at her parents', where Bonnie's younger siblings helped her clean her van. From there, she returned to where she was working and living. Later that evening, Bonnie left with her son. She said she was going to meet a friend. They didn't return. Her van was found 2 days later in Brandon, Florida. Neither Bonnie nor Jeremy were ever seen again. Several facts, both known and unknown at the time, have complicated the investigation. They include, number 1, the somewhat secret relationship Bonnie was having with a much older man. Number 2, a large cash withdrawal made on the very day Bonnie disappeared. And number 3, people Bonnie trusted who tried to scam her out of her money not long after she received the inheritance. The Dages family believes Bonnie met with foul play, although there is no evidence that Bonnie or Jeremy are deceased. The guest for this episode is Bonnie's mother, Linda Hirschberger. Unfound News. This past Wednesday, I conducted the last Unfound Live that will be shown on Facebook. From now on, the shows will be coming from the Unfound YouTube page. If you haven't tuned in, I hope you will next Wednesday when Unfound has the big premiere in the new location. Next, I've gotten considerably behind on shirts for guests and books covering the cases from Unfound's first season. Given the last month, I haven't had much time to do anything but the episodes. I expect that to change once 2019 gets here and I go back to Florida. I apologize for the delays. Finally, if any of you out there are in your university's alumni association, or you have connections to professors in charge of the criminal justice curriculum, please contact me privately. I'd like to speak about missing persons cases at your school in 2019. Thanks. Where you can find Unfound. Unfound supports accounts on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Contribute to Unfound at patreon.com/unfoundpodcast. This week, I need to thank Diane. You can also contribute at PayPal, unfoundpodcast@gmail.com. That is also this podcast's email address. The website, unfoundpodcast.com. Merchandise, the books at amazon.com in both ebook and print form. Don't forget the reviews. Shirts at myshopify.com/unfound-podcast. And cards at makeplayingcards.com/sell/unfoundpodcast. And please mention Unfound at all true crime websites and forums. Thank you.
I'm so happy to have on this episode of Unfound the mother of Bonnie Dages, Linda Hirschberger. Linda, welcome to Unfound.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to share Bonnie's case with anybody that wants to listen.
You're very welcome, Linda. And I especially get interested in cases that are around the Tampa area, and this one is, being that I live there, and I think this will be the fourth or fifth that I've covered from the Tampa area, so I'm very happy to have you on the program. Let's start here. Tell the listeners a little bit about your daughter, Bonnie. First of all, how many children do you have?
We had 5 children. Bonnie was the oldest. Her sister, Jennifer, was the next in line, and at the time of Bonnie's disappearance, she was 15, and then she had a brother, Joe, who was 13, and Nancy was 11, and Todd was 9.
Wow. Okay. That seems like a bustling household, Linda.
Yeah, definitely. And keep in mind, we lived in a 3-bedroom house with 1 bathroom. And so it was, and we lived there our whole lives, from before we had children to many years after this happened. So that's where they grew up. It was out in the country. We had almost 2 acres. We had horses and animals and things. But it definitely was a crowded household.
Yeah. And this was in the Plant City area of Florida, which is east of Tampa. What was the actual address at the time where you lived?
It's Lithia. You mean the actual address? Or
yeah, if somebody were to write you a letter back in 1993 when she disappeared, what would have been the Lithia? Is that the...
Right, it's Lithia.
Lithia, okay.
On Boyette Road, right.
Okay.
And the address was 18945.
Okay. Okay, so I'm guessing that Bonnie and some of her sisters probably had to share a room, being it was a 3-bedroom house, so it was a little cramped in there. Yeah. But how did all of your children get along, especially Bonnie? How did she get along with the rest of her siblings?
They got along pretty good. I think there were some, let's say, headbutting every now and then between them and things and all, but they did a lot of running outside. I said we had horses. We kept them out riding horses a lot, and my husband was a blacksmith, and her dad was a blacksmith, and he especially when they were younger, took them with him a lot and things, but kids still, get into little arguments with each other nonetheless.
It happens.
But I think overall they loved each other.
Okay. Now you mentioned horses, and horses are going to play a little bit of a part later in this conversation, but horses were one of Bonnie's interests. She loved to take care of them, ride them.
Right. She was good. She was riding from the time she could walk, almost literally, and we spent a lot of time with the horses, and she had a lot of memories with the horses, a lot of times out there.
Mm-hmm.
She liked quite a few other things too, though, and she was really good at writing poetry and writing in general. She used to go out with some of her friends. They'd go four-wheeling and just spend time being crazy kids. Mm-hmm. And she also played the tuba in the marching band at her school, at her high school. And she was in gifted classes in school, although she wasn't really happy with being in school.
She wasn't. Bonnie wasn't a big fan of school.
No.
Okay.
I think it smoothed out a little bit as she got older in her last couple of years. In going back and reading her journals and things, she actually sounded like she was making plans for the future, talking about going to college, talking about being a doctor, and, looking into the future quite a bit, which would have, required her to go to school more.
Right. Now we have to remember for the listeners that she was only 18 when she disappeared, so she didn't, I guess, get to the point where she was having any higher education. But did she graduate from high school, or did she go missing before she left high school?
Well, she was pregnant, and so what they did was her baby was due in the middle of December. So they, starting in, I think it was the 1st of December, she took a GED class and literally graduated just before the baby was born with a GED.
Okay. So there was no need for her to finish out her senior year then?
No, she was done.
Great.
By the time he was born, December the 13th, and she had already, completed and, had her GED certificate.
Okay. You mentioned her son. This is once again part of this disappearance, at least a little bit of part of it that we'll talk about later. But her son's name is Jeremy, and we have to remember he is also missing.
That's true.
In addition to your daughter. Who is the father? You're still not sure who the father is, and once again, we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail later. But at the time, 1992 into 93, there was a big question mark as to who the father could be. Is that right?
Yes. She believed that it was, a boy that was just a couple of years older than her that lived down the street. Mm-hmm. She was going out to see him, and I believe that she had every thought that was who the father was. And it's, I think, kind of one of those things. They did not believe he was physically capable of fathering a child, so he and his family were very adamant that it wasn't him. Mm-hmm. But about 2 years ago, 2 years after that, he had a child with another girl. So who knows? I mean, it's not like there were any DNA tests done, but according to her, that was the father.
According to Bonnie, that is who she believed, but once again, there was no genetic tests or anything done like that. And of course, being that the Bonnie and Jeremy disappeared like 4-5 months later, that couldn't be done.
Correct. 4.5 months.
4.5 months later, could not be done. Okay, so there's still question. We'll come back to that later as we talk more and more about what was going on with Bonnie at the time of her disappearance. Now, she did get a job working and then living at the family not too far from where you lived. Why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about this family? Their last name is the Creeches, Creech. And what was she doing there? Just anything you can tell the listeners about that.
Okay. This was a young couple. When I say young, I mean like late 20s. And they had a young child. I think he was like right at or just less than a year old. And the mother had broken her arm. And she wasn't being physically able to do everything she needed to do. So we didn't know them before this, but we knew the man's mother. And we also knew the lady that the man was working for lived not far from us. Mm-hmm. So between them, he knew Bonnie had, was kind of at loose ends, and anyway, so he asked if she could come stay with them to be the extra hand. They had a small room. I believe it was actually like a converted large closet, but it was big enough for a bed for her and a bed for Jeremy. And she was, pretty eager to get out of the house. She wasn't for us. She was not even 5 minutes away. She was like behind our property. It's out in the country. You had to go down a long driveway, but it was just behind where we lived. Mm-hmm. And so she was close, but a little bit more, out of the family then. So she was happy with it, and we thought it would be a good thing.
And right, and like you said, there was only 3 bedrooms in your house, and now she has a son, which even makes your house even more crowded. So it kind of works out for everybody.
But also keep in mind, she is 18. Mm-hmm. It's her choice to do what she wanted to do or whatever.
Absolutely.
We didn't see anything wrong with it, but she is 18 and she is legal, which is just something I want to remember when we're talking later on about some things, that she had choices.
Sure.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what did you ask me just then?
I was just saying that, that you said that she was ready to maybe get out of the house too, and it could be because she had a son, and, it was already crowded in your house, and,
absolutely.
As a mother, she had a lot of things to do regarding her baby. Of course, maybe you or maybe some of her siblings would help out, but still in the end, this sounds like a situation where she could go make some money, but her son could be with her at the same time. Seems like a good situation.
Sure.
Okay. All right. And how long
we looked at it at the time.
Okay. And how long did she work at this job before she disappeared? When did she start that job?
Okay, I have to tell the honest truth. We can't remember exactly. It was, we think, at the most 2 months, but we think it was only a month that she had been there. Jeremy, was born in December. Mm-hmm. She went missing in April, and I don't think he was teeny tiny when she went there. I think he was already, at least a couple of months old.
Okay.
And I am pretty sure, because of discussing it with her father and stuff, she wasn't there, but only about a month is what we believe.
Oh. Okay. While she was there, do you ever remember her complaining about anything? How do you, in your impression, once again, I know it's been 25 years now, but looking back at it now, how do you think things were going for that month or month and a half?
When we talked to her, which was often, she sounded happy. She and Anna seemed to be getting along very well, and they were kind of handling the children together and the taking care of the house and different things. They were being friends, and she seemed to be enjoying it.
All right, great, good. Now there's something else that is going to play, I think, a significant part in her disappearance. At least that's what it seems. The listeners will make the decision for themselves. Is that Bonnie had received a large sum of money. Why was that? When did that happen? You need to explain that, I think. And how much was it? If you could explain that to the listeners, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. She received an inheritance from my grandparents, her great-grandparents. And it had been in the money. It had been in the bank for many years. And it was, the money was in CDs, but it was in the probate court kind of thing and held until she turned 18. So her birthday was March the 12th, so on March 12th, 1993, she inherited this money. And it was right about $50,000. Wow. And as far as we know, the only thing that she had done with it is pretty much right after she got it in March. She took out $2,000, close to $3,000, and she bought a van. So she had transportation. and she bought it used from a friend of mine at where I worked at McDonald's, and she had only had that one for just a little over a month when she disappeared, and that's, I think, pretty much all for this part. There's more that we'll go into.
I do have to ask, being that she had several siblings, did none of her siblings get any money?
No, it was only left to her. It was split between her and my mother, which was my grandmother's only daughter, and then Bonnie was at the time my grandmother passed away. Bonnie was the only grandchild, or the only grandchild from her mother. So, now, weirdly enough, she wasn't actually the only grandchild, but she was the oldest, the only one my grandmother had actually held in her arms, is what I think it was. My brother had some children, but it's different.
Okay. I'm just saying maybe, I'm just wondering, when only one grandchild or great-grandchild receives money, that might cause some problems with other great-grandchildren with others. Is that, do you think that how do you remember that? Did any of Bonnie's younger siblings have any problems with that?
I don't think so. Not that I've ever heard them mention. And besides the $50,000, there was also and is also a piece of property in Missouri. Just under 3 acres, or right at 3 acres up in Missouri. And that was one of the things she had talked about, that when she got the money, that she wanted to take a trip to Missouri and go see that property, but she never got to.
So my impression, though, is $50,000, any 18-year-old gets that. Doesn't matter if it's 2018 or 1993. That's a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, I think there are a lot of adults, 40, 50-year-old adults, who would like to get $50,000. You're leaving me the impression, though, that she handled the money maturely. It's not like she ended up blowing it or anything. She went and got a van because she needed a car, and that was about it.
Now, keeping in mind, she disappeared only approximately a month and a half after she received the money.
Sure.
But that is true. She didn't go. The money was in a savings and loan, and to use the money, she had to take it out of those CDs, cash it out, and then she would put it into another bank, a regular checking account type bank. And she didn't run over there and take all the money out and put it all in the other bank. She only took out what she needed. And at the time, we only knew about the $2,500, whatever it was for the van. Although we found out more later.
Of course, but, and we're absolutely going to talk about that. But at least at the time, I mean, my impression of 18-year-olds, they get $50,000. Maybe they could blow it in a month and a half. So that she still had a large majority of it at the time she disappeared, I think, is a credit to her.
Right. I think so, too.
Okay.
And I never heard her talk about, well, I'm going to go buy a new car now, or I'm going to, do all the obvious, like I said, have a party or any of those things. It was to be used, and majorly, think about it and be careful how she used it.
Right. So being that you say she got this when she turned 18 and then she got this job, so is it my impression then that she got this job as a nanny and got this money around the same time? Very close to each other. Very close.
Correct.
Okay, and I think that's also interesting that she got this money but still said, you know what, I'm going to keep this job too. It wasn't like she said, I'm going to blow off the job and just live off this money. She was going to work too. So that's very admirable of her as well. Okay, so let's get to those days and weeks before she disappeared. I guess let's just talk maybe think in terms of April of 1993. In retrospect, I know what everything, and we're going to talk about everything that you and your husband and others discovered afterwards. But that April of 1993, anything that you look back now and say something that was unusual? Any of her movements, anything she said, anything? I know that she just, of course, gotten the money. She has this new job, so maybe she's she's not, maybe you're not seeing her as much, being that she's over there. Anything unusual that pops up now?
No, Just the opposite. Things were going very well. She was happy over there. She was coming back to see us. There were times when she was younger when she and her father didn't get along very well, but she was actually coming over to ask his advice. There was, as soon as she inherited that money, there was some people we'll talk about a little bit later. It was actually the sister of the people that she was, the man where she was living. She and her boyfriend came and asked right away to borrow money to buy something.
Right.
And Bonnie came to her dad, asked him what he thought about it. He told her that he didn't, he researched it and found out the truck they were talking about buying was actually, it was like a title but no truck. I can't think what you call it when something's been scrapped.
Okay.
And he told her, no, don't do that. She told them no. And you know, they seemed happy. They seemed to be working, you know. She was willing to take his advice and ask his advice. So things were looking pretty good. And she was coming to see us every couple of days. She would stop by where I worked. She'd come through the drive-through and say hi, you know, and show the baby. She also worked there, you know, when she was younger. She had worked at that same McDonald's. And so she would bring the baby by to see the people who work there.
Okay. We were going to talk about that, but we can talk about it right now. This whole truck thing with some people who knew the Creeches or were related to the Creeches, the people she was being a nanny for. Am I supposed to interpret that as maybe somebody was trying to rip her off?
Sounds like it to me. You know,
okay.
They were asking her for money, but then they told her, you know, I guess it would be kind of like a business deal. I don't remember the details, just that they were asking to borrow money to buy a truck. They gave her apparently the title to the truck as proof that there was really such a truck. But my husband looked it up and found out that there really wasn't such a truck.
Okay.
And then it went down from there. I keep that in mind, you know, for things that happen later.
Of course.
Because
and
I see that as, you know.
Right. I think you know, that makes total sense to keep that in
mind. I
mind.
have to say something.
Please.
You know, in our conversations, you asked me one time about, like, basically who was the suspect or whatever. But I have to say that everybody, not anybody, everybody is a suspect. Because we just don't know what happened. And it colors your life when everybody you look at them as, could this person be a murderer or not, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really a hard thing to live with, but you don't see a way not to. And you look at everything in your life. What could have happened? Did this person, you know, it could just been some silly kid doing silly kid stuff that you look at them and you think, is this person a murderer?
Right. I totally understand that, and you are not the first guest on this program that has said about that exact same thing, especially in cases where there are multiple choices. You know, there were multiple things going on, and even on cases where, you know, there are no suspects. You know, people who have vanished into thin air, where you know they didn't have some of the things going on that it seems Bonnie did. So I totally understand. You're totally right. I just want to remind the listeners, though, that she hadn't even had this money for a month, and already it seems somebody was trying to rip her off. It seems. Yeah. It seems. Okay. It seems. Okay. The day before, do you remember that day, the day before that she disappeared? Just in general. Anything that jumps out to you?
When you say the day before she disappeared, do you mean the last day that we saw her or the day before that?
I would say the day before she went and got the money out of the bank, just the day before that.
Okay.
It would be April 27th, I guess.
Right. We don't know anything.
Okay.
As far as I know, she was there at the Creeches all day, you know, just babysitting and being there.
Doing what she was doing.
Right. Yeah,
okay.
Nothing unusual that day.
Okay. Great. So let's move to, please.
Okay. As far as we knew at that time, there were other things that were going on a few days before that, but all we knew, and, you know, we don't know really even now anything about anything that happened the day before.
Right. Yeah, we'll just try to do this in the way you remember it, and then we'll go back and talk about everything you found out afterwards, because I want to make sure the listeners understand just what you, as her mother, thought was going on at the time. Okay, and then we're surely going to cover all that. So that takes us to April 28th, 1993, the day that is documented as the day that Bonnie disappeared. That's what's on the record, I guess you'd say. So April 28th, this is the day that's documented in a variety of places as the day that Bonnie disappeared. What do you personally remember about the day, what you were doing, and did you see Bonnie that day?
Okay. I was at work. I worked at McDonald's, and I got home about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and Bonnie was at the house. She had borrowed two of the younger siblings earlier in the day, and they helped her wash her van, and then she brought them back to our house. And while they were all at the house, my husband and I took her van with Jeremy, and we drove down to a ball field, a few miles from there, where her oldest sister, was working, and we picked her up, and then we brought them back to the house, after which Bonnie took her van and Jeremy and drove back to the Creeches. And that was the last time that we saw her that day, the last, we knew of her movements.
Okay. Would you say that was a pretty standard day? Nothing unusual about that?
Yeah.
Sounds like a regular family day, spending time together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. She seemed to be having fun. She was okay with letting us borrow Jeremy, and this was before car seats were like mandatory like they are now, and she had the car seat in her van, so we just took her van. And that's why we did that. But we took him down there and showed him off at the ball field to people and all, and then we came home.
Like any good grandparent, right?
Yeah.
Like any good grandparent, shows off their grandkids. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
When you were at work, was your husband Larry at home? Bonnie's father, was he at home during that time?
Yes, he was.
Okay.
Yeah, he was home that day.
Okay. And once again, you saw Bonnie, seemed like her regular self, and that was about it. Just a regular day. She took off then later, and she went back to the Creeches, as far as you know.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, now we're going to go to the next day. Once again, for listeners, we're doing this from Linda's point of view, and there's going to be a lot of things behind the scenes that Linda and Larry, Bonnie's father, found out later. But the next day, April 29th, when was the first time you thought something might not be right? Something different had happened.
I was at work again, and I got a call from her father, Larry, and asking if I had seen Bonnie or not, and that day, and I said no. And he said it was just a low-key kind of conversation, just that she happened to come by. He didn't sound excited or worried or anything.
Okay. Do you think it rose to the level that maybe he called over to the Creeches to see if she was over there? Or I think you told me that Anna Creech actually ended up coming over to your house instead. What did that happen later that day? Tell the listeners about that. Earlier. Okay.
Yeah, that
please.
Like mid-morning. Anna Creech and her sister-in-law, Terry McKenzie, came to his house, to the Dages house, and asked if he had by any chance seen Bonnie, if she had stopped by there that day. And he said no. And they did not say it in such a way that was like they were worried. It was casual. It was, oh, gee, just have you seen her that day? Then a couple of hours later, they came back, and I can't tell you how many hours, but hours later, they came back, and they told him that they had not told him the whole truth, that she had actually not come home the night before, and they hadn't heard from her. They didn't know what was going on, and they were worried. So that was right about the time then that I came home from work, and we discussed it. And at that point, we actually called the sheriff's department to report her missing.
Sure. at that point, if you can remember, and I know this is very difficult, do you remember what was going through your head at the time? Did you have any inkling of what might have happened right then? I know you don't have a lot of information at that time, but do you think maybe it was just a misunderstanding? Maybe she went somewhere, or what were you thinking?
No, they had told us enough, and they had showed us enough that they were worried that we were really scared. And that's why we called the police department, because things were definitely not normal, not in any way where they said, oh, well, she's done this before, anything like that. They thought it was unusual. They were worried about her, and nothing seemed right. So we called the police department.
Okay. And did the police come out?
They didn't. Well, they did. But it was the first conversation I had with them, it was hard to get them to agree to send somebody out because she was 18. And it had only been a matter of, at that time, a little less than 24 hours that she had been missing. Yeah. And they eventually did, I guess we told them enough of the circumstances that they felt there might be an endangerment. So they did send a deputy. He came to our house. It happened that we had met him before, and he knew who Bonnie was, but he took our information. He took it as if he was writing a report and asked us all the pertinent questions. And then he went down and he talked to the Creeches. And after that, the only information he asked from me that night that I didn't have was her tag number. So after talking to the two groups, us and then to the Creeches, he left. And he told us later, he made the statement that when he left, he went by the cash and carry parking lot, which is something we didn't know, but Creeches had told him that when she left the night before, that's where she was headed. And we'll talk about why later. Okay. But he stated that he went by that parking lot and her van was not there at that time. Now, I don't know if that's correct. I don't know if he just drove by and glanced that way and maybe missed it. Who knows? But he made that statement.
Okay, let me ask you this. When Anna Creech and her sister-in-law, whose name happens to be Terry, and that's going to get a little confusing later because another Terry is going to be coming into play.
Yes.
When they came over, whether the first time or the second time, did either of them ever say to you or Larry, Bonnie's father, that she had gone out the night before with her son Jeremy to the cash and carry? Did that ever come up at that point?
No.
Didn't?
No, we didn't know that at that time. If it did, we would have gone and looked ourselves.
Right.
But there was stuff. Well, anyway, no.
Okay, all I'm saying is it seems like later Anna Creech and whoever else were able to tell the cops that she went out.
Correct.
But they didn't tell you that when they were looking for her. Okay, that's interesting.
Correct.
That's interesting. Okay. All right, so you had the Anna Creech come over, look for Bonnie that next day. You don't know where she is. Then all of you get very worried for very logical reasons. The cops get involved. They take a report. You don't really know how serious they're taking it. Did you do anything at that point? Did you get in your car, ride around? Did you and Larry go out to look for her?
No, not then, because I guess half of you're thinking they're going to come back. I mean, we didn't know at that time so much of what we know now. And and it's a big area. I mean, we didn't have at that time a clue.
Right.
We didn't know all the things we were to find out later that were going on. At that point, we just knew nothing. The next day, I called the police department again. We're thinking that they filed a missing persons report on her already. And when I called them to give them that tag information, they said there was no such report. Nothing had been reported, whatever they call it. And so we had to start all over again. And again, I had to convince them there was an issue. Now it's been almost 48 hours that she's missing. Maybe 36, but, a day and a half.
Sure.
We've already lost they say, the most important time that there is. And they did send out 2 detectives. And when those 2 detectives came out, they pretty much came out with the impression of a runaway. That nothing bad had happened, that she had probably run away. They talked to us. They went back and talked to the Creeches. The Creeches told her that Bonnie had been seeing, that the reason Bonnie went to the Cash and Carry parking lot that night was to meet her, and I guess for lack of a better word, I'll call him her boyfriend. And that she had been seeing this person ever since that she'd been to her house, and that actually she had been seeing him before that. He is a neighbor and an older person. He's actually
right. Well, let's just Linda. Let's just talk about him right now. So very early on, after she disappeared. So she disappears on April 28th. But once again, she and her son Jeremy, who was very, very young, disappear, which in my mind should have made this a little more serious than the cops took it. I understand that 17, 18-year-olds run away, but when you have a 4.5-month-old child involved,
right?
Come on now.
I have to say that I think that that is the only reason that they actually did consider the case at all. That without that, they wouldn't have done anything for, I don't know how many days it is that they wait or whatever. But the only reason that they went ahead and sent somebody else to check it out was because the baby was involved.
Okay. I think that's excellent insight on your part, because I have to say I'm thinking kind of the same thing, which is sad. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's just get right to this then. You had mentioned this boyfriend that you didn't know about. His name is Terry Christie. He goes by the name Snake, and I'm going to call him Snake. That is his nickname. That's not like a pejorative or anything else. That it is his nickname, and I'm just going to try to separate his name from the Terry that you've already mentioned, who is a woman, whereas this is a guy. Okay, when did you first hear about Terry Snake Christie?
Well, you mean in relationship with
in relationship to having some sort of involvement with your daughter Bonnie in an intimate kind of way?
Okay. The second time the Creeches came down, they mentioned him, that Bonnie had been seeing him, and I don't think they went into any kind of detail. They were coming in, they were talking to my husband, but they did bring his name up, and possibly just saying that, I don't know what they said, to tell you the truth. I know they brought his name up, but again, not in detail, not to where we knew very much about it, until later when the police actually went down there, and the second day when the police went down there and talked to her. They told the police a lot more than they told us, and then the police told us some of that, but it took a while for us to find out all the details. And truthfully, I have to admit, at this point, it's hard to distinguish between what we knew at this moment and what we knew at that moment. It all just runs together.
I understand.
In my mind as to what we knew. So I might be incorrect as to which conversation something, but I know it wasn't early on. We didn't know about him really until either later of that first day or on the second day.
Okay,
and the cops knew more than we did.
And most importantly, you had no idea, neither you nor Larry, and I'm going to guess any of your other kids, had any idea that Bonnie, who was just 18 at the time, was having a relationship with Snake, who was like 40 years old. You had no idea about that, surely?
No.
Okay. And that was the big part that you found out. I'm guessing you maybe heard of Terry Christie before, just in passing for other reasons, because he lived in the area?
Oh, more than that. He was, his brother and his brother's family had lived right next door to us for, I think, about a year. His children, the brother's children, were the same age as our children. Their last names started with close to the same letters, the C's and the D's. So they always were in rooms, classes together, at school, rode the bus together. Our children and those nieces and nephews of Snakes were very close to each other. And we're talking about like for the past 10 years before all this happened, from the time Bonnie was little. And so we knew him. He would often, all the kids were at the ball field. They either were doing cheerleading, football, baseball, and the Christies were there. The kids were playing the same sports together. The kid's father, Tony Christie, was a coach and a friend, known him for many, many years, and his wife. And then Snake is with them a lot. And there was another man named Tommy Mark, who was a good friend of Snake's, who was, again, a coach, a neighbor. Kids grew up together. I mean, we know them. It's not like so-and-so lives down the road, but I know who they are, but that's it. I mean, our families had intertwined for many, many years.
Okay. So when you heard, I guess, from the police that Anna had told them that Terry and Bonnie were having a relationship, that was very surprising to you. And I'm guessing that, did you kind of reject that at first as that being a possibility? Or did the first time you heard that, you said, oh, yeah, I guess that is possible?
I can't answer that. I just don't remember.
Just don't remember.
I can't tell you. Like I said, in my mind, for 25 years, we've known about it. And it's there. It's a fact. I can't even tell you what.
Okay. Fine.
I just don't know.
Linda, that's totally fine. All we're trying to, the most important part is you didn't know that Bonnie and Terry were having a relationship. That's the most important part. Okay. What kind of reputation does Snake have in that area? What's his reputation?
We were to find out that he does not have a very good one. When all this came out, we ended up having a couple of women from our neighborhood came to us. They came to us when they heard what was going on, and they told us of relationships that they had with Snake Christie. And it was a similar story in each case where he would have affairs with people. He would take from them money. I don't know what all, if it was just money or vehicles, or he gained from them one way or the other, and then went on,
Moved on. Okay.
And they were often left much the worse for the relationship, either divorced or financially ruined or whatever. But, it was apparently, and I'm saying this is what people came to us and told us.
Okay.
And it was more than one person, so I believe what they were telling us. We're not just trying to make it up about him.
Okay. These women that he had these relationships with, it sounds to me, I'm not going to put words in your mouth. I'm just going to use it myself. Sounds like a little bit of a gigolo, a little bit. Meeting women, using them, getting money from them for whatever else, and moving on, kind of leading them on.
Correct.
Okay.
I would say that at the least.
Okay. Yeah, but were any of these women as young as Bonnie was? She was 18, and of course you eventually found out that Terry had maybe had a relationship with Bonnie starting when she was 17, possibly.
Yes.
Okay.
I had found a letter. I think it was from Bonnie, a note, not a letter, but a note that she had written sometime, let's say in the summer of 1992, after she was pregnant, but, in the middle of the year. And she had gone riding with Snake. But that's all. That's all I knew. It was just something about having seen him out riding horses and things. So I did not know at the time there was more to it, but that she did know him. But that was all I knew at the time.
Okay. Let me just get this right out of the way as well. Is there any belief that Jeremy could have been Snake's son? I know what you thought, that there was this other kid who was much closer in age to Bonnie. Is there any possibility that Snake could have been the father of Jeremy? Your mind?
I don't think so. I feel like at the time that she got pregnant, she was seeing the boy down the road. And that when she found out that she was pregnant, that was basically the end of their relationship. And it was after that when she, according to that letter, I'm just going to assume that that letter was actually the beginning of their relationship, in retrospect. And if that is true, it was after, she was already pregnant. But this is all guesswork on my part.
Right.
I don't know.
I know. I'm asking because I'm sure maybe some of the listeners are thinking the same thing. If they were having a relationship, she has her son in December. Of course, she's still 17. She didn't turn 18 until March of 1993. That now there's this Terry guy. He was having this secret relationship with her. A lot of people are maybe going to draw that conclusion, and I think it's important for the listeners to know, your opinion on it. So you're saying like 99% sure that Jeremy was not Snake's son. 99%.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Correct.
Now, it seems to me, though, that the Creeches, where Bonnie was working for that month and a half before she disappeared, they did know about Bonnie having this relationship with Terry. Now, I realized that she was 18 years old, but do you think that there's any reason that maybe didn't get back through the grapevine before Bonnie disappeared, that she was having that? Is that something that you think the Creeches kept a secret, or do you think that's something that Bonnie told them? Once again, I realized that Bonnie was 18 at that point. She could do what she wanted for the most part. How do you look back on that now?
I don't know. I don't know why, what a difference it could have made in everything had we known some of this that's come out later, but we didn't. I don't know why. Maybe to them it didn't seem weird that what the arrangement turned out to be. And we found this out way down the road.
Later.
But what was going on at the time was that Mike Creech worked literally just about a mile down the road, if even that far. And he would walk to work because he didn't have a driver's license, and I believe they didn't even own a car, but I'm not positive about that. But he would leave, let's say, just before 8 o'clock in the morning, and then he would come home around 4. So Bonnie's situation was that she had to be home when he left, and she could leave when he got home. So she was free all those other hours. She could be there or not. It didn't make any difference. They allowed her that freedom. She just had to be there while he was gone. So what we found out later was that where she was living was probably less than a half a mile, probably a quarter of a mile from where Snake Christie lived. And at night, and I'm assuming that she didn't go till late in the night, but at night, on the nights that she went to see him, she would leave late and walk. And where they lived was kind of back in the woods. And she would walk from their house to his house and stay for some amount of time and then leave and come back to their house. Now, I know she could leave at 4 and she could be back by 8 in the morning, but as this was apparently a very deep, dark secret from everybody, not just us, I'm assuming she went late at night and came home early in the morning before daylight, before people, and she was walking. And she was seen, later we were told, she was seen walking down the road in the middle of the night by one of the police officers that we met later that lived in our area. So they verified that she was walking in that direction during the night. So this is what we were told.
And these were things that were going on behind the scenes that you didn't know about. And it seemed most people, it's not this that, I mean, she wasn't living with you anymore. It's not like you were keeping tabs on her, but and not just you, but a lot of people didn't know about this. In retrospect, do you think any of even Bonnie's friends even knew about this?
Yes and no. As far as we could understand, he being Snake, told her to keep this an absolute secret. And there were lots of other things that happened later, but obviously it was stressed over and over again that this was a secret. She told several of her friends, no details, just that she was seeing an older man, and she would tell them some things, but she did not tell them his name or any specific things. One friend, her best friend, she did say who it was. So we had verification that way, that there was, she did tell someone and his name and some of the things that happened. So we feel that we know that for sure. The problem was that when the police first came down and first started investigating and questioning. Now, I'm telling you what we understood from what the police told us. That
I get it.
Felt that they did not believe in this situation. They went to Snake and they questioned him, and he said, "Sure, I know Bonnie. She lives down the road. She's friends with my niece and nephews, and I see her around and all. But that's it. Certainly no physical relationship."
And did not own up to that, and has never owned up to this relationship to this day, 25 years later.
Correct. In those first interviews, that's as much as he would say, but he said it willingly. They asked him if they could walk through his house, his trailer, and he allowed them to. And then after that, they asked him to come down and do like a lie detector test, and he refused. They asked him to come to the police station and make a statement, and he came with his lawyer, and he made no statement at all. The lawyer wouldn't, I don't know what the terms are, but he did not make any statement at all. And that was the last, those first couple of interviews with the police at his house was all that he would say on the situation.
Okay.
No, he had no relationship with her.
All right. Now this is important because at some point the Creeches, I don't know if it was Anna Creech or Mike Creech, told the police that evening of April 28th, the evening that we believe that Bonnie disappeared, she said that she was going to Snakes. Is that right?
Correct.
That's what they told the police.
Not for the first time.
Right.
But that she was going up to the cash and carry. I don't know why she would leave early at that moment, but she went about dark. This is April, so it gets dark fairly early, not like in the summer when it's late, but she wasn't supposed to be meeting him until about 9 o'clock that night. And that was apparently a pattern. And when I talk about her going to his house, I don't think it happened like every night. We're talking about maybe once a week or something, not all the time, but when she did go, that's how it went. And she was apparently several times when they met, it was at this cash and carry at about 9 o'clock at night.
Okay, and she couldn't walk there. She would have to drive there.
Right.
Okay.
So again, that's probably after she got her car. Why they were meeting like that, I cannot answer to you. The man was not married. His son was, I believe, living with him. He was there sometimes, but not all the time at his house.
Okay.
So,
did Snake actually have I know he's a gigolo and doing these things. Did he have an actual job? Yeah.
He did. He had a partner, and they owned a lawn care business called TLC Lawn Care.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to get that on the record. Okay, so he did have a job doing something where he might have had a responsibility to be somewhere at some time.
Right.
Okay. Of course, Bonnie is missing these first few days, and of course she's still missing 25 years later. Jeremy is missing, but her van, and we've already kind of touched upon this earlier with the one cop, the van was missing at least for a few days. Where was it found? Right. When was it found? And who found it?
The second day, April the 29th, when the two detectives came out, after they talked to everybody they wanted to talk to. They talked to us, Creeches, to Snake, Christie. When they were done for the day, on their way out, they went by the cash and carry. And when they did, they saw her van in the parking lot. So at that moment, it basically changed the whole attitude of the investigation. It became way more not the not the runaway, not as, I guess I probably forgot to mention it, but what they were saying to us is their thoughts at that point after talking to Snake and all was, here's an older man seeing a young girl. They don't want it known. He's probably got her hidden away somewhere, where he can go see her and things like that, but their advice to him was to tell her to go ahead and come home and let's get, make everybody happy and have her come home. Our thought is she's 18. Why would she run away from home? She wasn't living at home, for one thing. So why would she run away from home? Why would she do any of the things they were suggesting? To us, it didn't make sense, but they've seen a lot more than we have.
Okay.
But they did find the van. They called us. We drove down there and verified that definitely was her van. When they looked in her van, they found that her diaper bag, and in her diaper bag, in Jeremy's diaper bag, was her wallet with her ID, her driver's license, and $75 of cash were in the diaper bag. There were no the car seat for Jeremy was not in the car, nor were her car keys were not there. Just the diaper bag and her wallet.
Do you remember, I know this is a very obscure detail, was it locked? Was it unlocked? Did they have to break into it since there weren't, or somebody has extra keys since there were no keys there? Did they have to break into it, or do you remember?
No, I don't. It's a good point, but I really don't remember. I don't think they broke into it because quite 6 months later when they released it out of the impound, there were no broken windows on it. So I don't think they broke in, but I don't know whether we had a key that we brought with us or if it was unlocked. I do not know.
Okay, maybe they Slim Jimmed it. That's very possible. Especially, we're talking 25 years ago, cars were easier to Slim Jim, that like thin piece of metal you can stick down between the window and do it that way.
I know.
And that could be easier done then than probably now. Anything unusual about you said that the car seat, Jeremy's car seat was missing, which is a little unusual, but his diaper bag and Bonnie's wallet was there. Anything that stuck out to the police that you were told? Did they do any forensics on the van, to your knowledge? It sounds like they held it for a while. Did they do anything in regards to any of that?
Yeah. Yes, they definitely, they fingerprinted the whole van and everything. And there were a variety of fingerprints. And I do not believe that snakes were there. But this is something that my husband has always believed, that one of the reasons that the last day that we saw her, when she had her brother and sister come down and help her wash and clean the van, it was kind of in response to the fact that just a few days before that, she had taken Jeremy in the van, taken him over to her best friend Lori's. And when the mother had put Jeremy back in the van, she smelled a man's cologne and made a comment about it. So he's always believed that one of the reasons that they cleaned the car was that he had been in the car and that he had told her to get rid of any traces of him having been in there, the cologne, any fingerprints, anything like that. So whether, we don't know that. That's just looking back and things we knew would have fallen in line with that, but we don't know it, but we've always suspected it.
And that would certainly go in line with the lengths, it seems, that Bonnie and Snake were going to cover up or hide their relationship. That would certainly go in line with that.
Correct.
Sure.
Correct.
Okay. So, of course, the van was cleaned out the day before, or on April 28th, and it's found maybe a couple days later. And it doesn't seem, at least all these years later, nothing significant came from the work that the police did on the van, it seems.
No. I mean, not that we know of, no.
Okay. When you say cash and carry, maybe we need to explain that. Cash and carry is like one of these payday loan places or something like that, or what is it?
It's a grocery store.
Oh, it is?
It's a grocery. Yeah.
Cash and carry is a grocery store. I don't think I knew that until right now. Okay.
Yeah, like Publix, and in our area, it's gone back and forth between cash and carry and Winn-Dixie and things, but at that time it was a cash and carry.
Okay, thank you.
Spelled with a K. With K.
Cash and carry with a K. Okay. And this, once again, was nowhere near where Bonnie was living, where Snake lived. This is a place that you'd have to drive to get to?
Correct. It's in the town of Brandon, which is about, I think, 6 to 8 miles from where we lived. And it was at that time, it was one of the main grocery stores around. We used to go there a lot to do our grocery shopping. I think just recently, about halfway in between, another grocery store had opened up. But right up until that time, this was the main one we did all of our grocery shopping at.
Okay. Is there something else you wanted to say about the van being at the cash and carry, Linda?
Yes, just a visual image is the fact that it was a grocery store, so it was a large parking lot. There were 2 or 3 other stores in that, let's say a mall kind of thing, a strip mall. And so it was a fairly good size. You could see it from the road better than you can now because many other stores have come up around it. But at that time, if you were driving down the main road that goes to our area, Lithia Pinecrest Road, you could see the parking lot. And where they found it was towards the road, further away from the store itself, more towards the road. And so it was actually easy to spot when they did go to look for it.
And you had mentioned earlier that the first cop that came out to your house claims that he went by the cash and carry shortly after that and her van was not there. Is that right?
That's what I understand. I mean, I haven't been able to someday what I hope is that they'll actually the police will actually let us see their records and things and we can go back. But at the moment, I can't verify it. But my husband believes that the day that man came out on the 29th, the first one that came out, he took, he wrote down everything we said, but he didn't turn it in. He said about 4 days, after that, he went on vacation. That's what I meant to say. It was after that. He went on vacation. Nobody could reach him to talk to him for about 4 days. But then when he did come back and the detectives questioned him about what he had found out that first day and all, he then said, after talking to everybody, I drove by the cash and carry, but I did not see her van. And we believe that's true.
So the van had to have been put there sometime after that, meaning the van really had not sat there that long before it was discovered. Maybe less than a day?
It's a possibility.
Okay,
it's a possibility. We just don't know. And we've never been able to, there were some more situations I might talk about later with that one policeman, but we just don't know. We were never able to question him. Did he really go by? Did he just say he did? We don't know.
Okay. Now here's probably the most important fact about this case, and it has to do with that money that you've already mentioned, that money that Bonnie got when she turned 18 from her great-grandmother, her great-grandmother, your grandmother. It was about $50,000. But when did you find out that on April 28th, the day that we presume she disappeared, that Bonnie went to the bank or the S&L, whatever she had to do, wherever the kind of institution it was, and took out $15,000? When did you find that out?
Within the next few days of her disappearance. It was within that first week, but I don't know exactly. The police were going back and forth between the Creeches and us, and we were finding out a little bit more every conversation. There were a lot of things that they didn't really want us to know, and I don't know how to say that the right way. A lot of things that came out were pretty hurtful. Some of the things they knew, but it had been told to them, like, don't tell anybody. So as things got more serious and everybody got more sure that something had happened, they told more. In the beginning, they held back. because they weren't sure what needed to come out into public and what didn't. So I can't tell you the exact timing of it, but we did find out within a few days that last day, the 28th, that she had been to the bank and removed $15,000, that she had taken it, and according to the Creeches, that she had, on her way home, she had met with Snake Christie and handed him the money, and then she had come on, and all the other things that we knew about her coming in and washing the van, and all that happened after that.
Okay, so let me just, for the listeners, I'm going to do this. So you, on the day, April 28th, you were working, okay? But at the same time, Bonnie, that day, went to the bank, got this $15,000 out. Like you said earlier in this conversation, she had money in CDs. Maybe she had to cash some of these CDs out to get that money. Okay. So she got cash, not a check, but actual like $100 bills or whatever. She takes them. Your understanding, the belief is from the Creeches is that then she went and met Snake somewhere. And I'm under the idea that maybe even somebody saw her and him at this place, this park. But she then, from there, comes over to your house and gets her van clean. She has some couple of her younger siblings help clean this van. At no time does she tell you, your husband, her siblings, anybody else that she went to the bank.
Correct.
All right. So that was something, once again, she's kind of keeping it on the down low. And, this $15,000, once again, a considerable amount of money, especially if you're taking out in cash. You're not like getting a cashier's check or something. Okay. Please.
Can I back up on that just a little bit?
Sure.
All right. The whole story is that she actually went to the savings and loan the Friday before that. And she cashed in the CD, and she got a cashier's check. And she took that cashier's check over to what was going to become her bank, and she deposited it on that Friday. And then she came back on the next Monday, and she was going to take out the $15,000, and they wouldn't let her. They said it had to be in there, or maybe she deposited, maybe she kept the cashier's check and she deposited it on Monday. But anyway, the bank wouldn't let her have the money. They told her it had to be in there for 3 days, 3 business days.
Right.
So the weekend before didn't count. So she was not able to come back to Wednesday. And she did. And when she came back on Wednesday, they have her on videotape, so we know exactly that she was there. We know that what time she was there. We know that she had not only Jeremy, but she had the Creeches child with her. She took it out in cash, and according to what she told one of her friends, or it could have been the Creeches, I'm not sure, but Snake told her exactly how to get the money. A certain amount of $100 bills and different denominations. He specified what denominations for her to get. And when she was at the bank, she asked for that specific types of bills, and went on from there.
Okay. So she gave this money to Snake shortly after she got the money out of the bank, and then she shows up at your house, once again, to remind the listeners, where her van got cleaned and everything else. And of course, we mentioned that a couple times now. Okay. Right. And nobody knew about this until afterwards, several days down the road.
Well, we didn't know.
Yeah, you didn't know.
The Creeches knew.
The Creeches knew. Right,
the Creeches knew, yeah. Now, also that, of course, Snake denied anything about the money. What we understood, from what she told the Creeches and what she told her another friend, Lori, was that he had asked her for this money because he wanted to start a restaurant. And I cannot tell you the details. I mean, as an adult, I'd say nobody's going to start a restaurant for $15,000. You need a heck of a lot more than that. But was it that he said he had X amount and he just needed this much more? What? We don't know. But he asked her for the money to start a restaurant. They, just days before she disappeared, they had 2 different meetings. One was a dinner meeting She went out with one of her friends and picked out a dress, and because she didn't wear dresses. And so they went out and they picked out a dress. She wore that dress to go to dinner with Snake and another person who we have no idea who that was.
Mm-hmm.
They had another meeting where they met this person in the middle of the night and behind a different grocery store. And why, there's a lot more to that. I don't know if you want to talk about it now or later. But there was a lot of steps to this. You know, he asked for the money. There was verification. There was another person involved. They had discussions about the business. It was going to be, you know, what kind of a restaurant it was going to be, where it was going to be. I don't know. You know, there seemed to be more than just Snake involved in this.
How do you know about the discussions of these meetings? Because Bonnie then went and told somebody else about this afterwards?
Correct.
All right. And who did she tell?
Some to the Creeches and some to her friend Lori. And then there's one other a girl that was about the same age as Bonnie, Jenny Bryant, who was also friends, you know, in the kind of the same group of friends there that knew the Creeches and Terry McKenzie and Bonnie. And then she told that girl quite a bit of things also. But those seem to be the only people. The outer fringes of her friends, she never gave details to. She would say something happened, but she wouldn't give names or specifics.
Okay. And so I'm guessing, you know, of course, you don't have to be a missing persons expert to know generally restaurants are not started with cash. Usually it's good enough just to, if you're going to invest in something, to just good enough to have a check. So there's that if this was some sort of legitimate deal. Why don't you said about the meeting behind this building. How do you even know about that? Maybe you can give the listeners a little more details about how we know, for example, this, what sounds to me like a Shady meeting at the middle of the night. How do you even know about that? How do you know about that?
She told her friend specifics. And she told her that Anna Creech knew a little bit. Bonnie came to Anna one evening and said, the phone's going to ring in the middle of the night. She said, don't worry about it. It's going to be for me. I'll answer it. So Anna noted that it was like 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning when the phone rang. And then right after that, Bonnie left. And then Bonnie, like the next day, told her friend Lori that she left and she met Snake at the closer grocery store, which was also a cash and carry. It's only about 6 miles, 5 or 6 miles from where we live. And it's at an intersection with the gas stations and businesses and all. And that she met Snake there. Then they got into one vehicle, which one I don't know, and they drove around behind this building where it's dark and there was nothing but woods behind it. So, you know, nobody to see. And they met someone, had some sort of meeting. Then when it was done, they came back around to the front of the parking lot where they then were surprised by the opening manager. He usually got there at 5 o'clock, and he came in at 10 minutes to 5 that day. And so they jumped in their cars and ran. But Bonnie said that Snake was very upset. He was very worried about being recognized, one weird point. Two, that it seemed as though they knew what time he would be coming into open, as if possibly they'd been there before.
Sure.
And three, who meets somebody behind the grocery store? I mean, none of it makes any sense.
No, it doesn't. I agree.
You know, especially not in the line of what she seemed to feel they were doing. As far as I know, she did not say anything to her friend as to what happened behind the grocery store.
Okay.
And only her main stress was the fact of how upset Snake was. Now, we actually went back and questioned that manager, and he said that he specifically remembered that when he came in, he saw the cars in the parking lot, and he was worried because he thought he might be getting robbed. because there shouldn't have been anybody there.
Yeah.
And he noted, but he could not remember what the vehicles looked like. So we ended up, he was willing, and we asked him to undergo hypnosis. And when he did, he described two vehicles that, matched Bonnie's car and Snake Christie's. I forget what he had, a car, truck, I think he had. But he recognized, he gave enough description that it definitely could have been their vehicles.
Okay. Yeah, this all sounds very, very shady. The cash, the meetings, where they're taking place, the time they're taking place. And on top of that, if we're to believe Anna Creech, is to believe that there was some other guy besides Snake there. And you still to this day, don't know who that person is?
No.
All right. You had mentioned a friend of his, Tommy Mark. Is there any possibility it could have been he?
I absolutely don't know. I just don't know.
Okay.
And I'd almost say no, because Bonnie knew him. And the way she talked, my impression, because she didn't talk to me, so I don't know. But the impression I got of what she said to her friends was not someone she knew. Not someone she knew at all.
Okay. That $15,000. Excuse me, please.
I'm sorry. I said, but once again, that's my impression. I don't know.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, just to be clear, the $15,000 never been seen again, has it?
No.
None of it.
No.
And in fact, being that Bonnie's van got cleaned out just a couple hours after she was at the bank, no cash was found in the car. And even when the van was found, it was found $75 was in it. That was it.
Correct. My understanding is she actually took $15,000 and $75 out that day. That was basically the amount of the CD that she cashed out, and then there was $75 in her purse. Also, the fact that when the children were helping her clean out the van, she allowed them to go into her purse or the diaper bag and get some gum out. So we feel like if she had this money in her purse at that time, they would have seen it, that she wouldn't have allowed them. She would have gotten out, given it to them. Would she have left it in the house while she was cleaning the van? I would say no, that she would keep this money close to her or something. But again, we're looking back, making guesses.
Right. The way you remember it with this van, and I realized she didn't have the van very long, had her siblings ever helped her clean out the van before? How often did it get cleaned? Maybe that might have been the first or second time. It might even been cleaned. Who knows?
Yeah, I don't know. As far as I know, it was the only time that she did that, that she called them down. She called our house. They walked down there. Like I said, it was just, a very short distance. And they walked over there, and then she drove them back home afterwards. But I don't remember that happening. I just don't remember anything specific about it before that.
Okay. Now, probably most importantly, to your knowledge, did Snake ever start a restaurant with anybody? Was there ever any restaurant that ever got started in the Plant City, Brandon, East Tampa area that you know of that Snake had anything to do with that at all?
No, there was not.
Okay. Let's talk about him a little bit more. Just maybe we need to. So we have this money that is now missing, and she takes it out on the day that she disappears. So we could believe that that's probably not a coincidence. But let's talk about Terry a little bit more. You said the police tried to talk to him, and he lawyered up, pretty much?
Correct.
All right. In fact, to this day, he kind of denies or doesn't want to talk about any relationship that he ever had with Bonnie at all.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
To your knowledge, has he ever been able to give his whereabouts to anybody regarding maybe the day or maybe the evening into the night, the morning of April 29th? Anything like that? Has he ever said?
Well, the day, the 28th, the same day that she went to the bank, the same day that she gave him the money in the afternoon, that morning, Snake and his lawn care partner both came by our house, the Dages residence, and spoke to Larry, who her dad, who was home at that time, about just general things. I don't know that they spoke of anything in any kind of importance, just like they stopped by and looked at the horses, talked about horses, or, you know, things like that. Her father is a farrier, a blacksmith, and nothing. I think that possibly he had maybe come by one other time, but it wasn't something that was regular or anything like that. And it didn't seem noteworthy until we knew all the rest of the story. And then looking back, well, oh no, that was the same day he came by the house. You know, was he trying to prevent Larry from leaving and possibly running into Bonnie while she was doing all these other things? I don't know. It just is a weird coincidence. You know, we have to believe he came by for a reason, you know, maybe to kind of check and see if Larry knew what was going on, feel him out. Absolutely no idea why. Just a weird thing that happened.
Yes. So here was this guy, Snake Christie, came over with a partner of his in this business, this lawn care business, just out of the blue, stops at your house. You were not home because you were at work. Larry, Bonnie's father's home by himself. And I've talked to Larry about this conversation, and Larry told me he kind of got the feeling that the conversation was really about nothing. And they walked around, and then it was just, okay, well, it's been an hour, I'm out of here. You know, and it just happened to be, is it a coincidence that the time that Snake was at your house, even though you personally were not there, is it about the same time that Bonnie was going to the bank to get that money? Same time.
Yeah, seems to be. I don't know the actual time that he was at our house. You know, when you look back sometimes, because we didn't note that for a while down the road, I don't know what time he was there. You know, Larry might, her father's memory is way better than mine. I just don't know the times, but that is my understanding, is that basically it was at the time she would have been at the bank. Okay.
Yeah, that's very strange too. And like you said, your family kind of knew Snake just from being around. You know, like you said, he baseball coach or little league coach, something like that. But his brother was, but he hadn't maybe, you know, you weren't maybe that close that he would just pop into your house once in a while.
Right, exactly. Correct.
And he just happens to pop in on the day that Bonnie disappears, and he just also happens to be behind the scenes having a relationship with your daughter.
Right.
And of course that never came up that day when he was talking to Larry, of course. Okay.
No.
You were going to say something.
No, I was just agreeing with you. You know, that we just, at that time, there was so little that we knew that we found out later.
Right. You've just found out about all this. And once again, the listeners know that they now know that there was quite a bit going on behind the scenes, not just the day that Bonnie disappeared, but kind of in the month, if not more, you know, leading up to her disappearance. Once again, we realized that at the time that she and Snake met, she's 17, he's in his late 30s, if not 40 years old. Illegal most places. You know, what's that age guy doing with that young a girl? And we know that at least Florida has some laws against that, but they were covering it up. But then she turns 18 in March. She's going to do what she's going to do. But still, it seems that for many people, this was a secret. Maybe the creatures seem to know about it, but they didn't tell you. But once again, she's 18. What are you going to do? However, there is something else. This did come up with Larry, and once again, I don't want to hit this too hard, but is there the possibility that Snake was, I'm just going to say it, forcing Bonnie maybe to go out with other men for monetary reasons? Is that something that has popped up as a possibility since she disappeared that you found out about this?
Yes and no. We found mostly through reading her journals and some diaries that she had, that he was, I don't know if forcing is the right word, he was encouraging her to do a lot of things that we couldn't imagine, that things had gone so far down the road that sexually beyond anything we would have ever thought. And since then, I've done reading on what's called a Romeo pimp and girls that are, and also in human or the sex trafficking.
Yes.
And it is a very common thing that they start out being the boyfriend.
Absolutely.
And then they start requesting them to do this, then to do this, then to do this. And they push them further down the road till they get to a point where they don't feel like they can get out. They've done so many things that nobody wants them anymore except this guy. And that's what it sounds like. He was encouraging her, to say the least, to do very many unacceptable things, and things that you wouldn't just look at an average girl and say, oh, well, this would be a common thing to do. But when you read or hear the stories of the girls who have gotten pulled into the sex trafficking, it's a common story.
It is.
It's not near as weird as it seems to us. And we think that has a lot to do with what happened to her. We think that he was sending her to parties that, but whether for sure there was money involved or not to that extent yet, I don't know. But he was definitely, it sounds like he was leading her in that direction. Okay. You mentioned earlier that she was younger than all the women that we knew about.
Yes.
Okay. I want to make the point of she's younger than all the other women that we knew about.
Good point. Good.
Yeah. There were, I'm going to guess that there were other people, but we just don't know them. And that's part of what I'm hoping that from a broadcast like this, that maybe there's other people who were involved at that time or involved with him or knew something, but they were young and they didn't want these things coming out. But maybe now as an older person with children of their own, there's things that they will tell us that they might not have told us. Many of the people that were interviewed by the police were minors. And we know specifically that some of them were questioned in front of their parents. And like I said, the stuff that we're talking about is not what you want to talk about in front of your parents.
Yeah.
But maybe if they were re-questioned now, there might be things that they would tell.
Especially in private, especially where it would just be with the police and this wouldn't be going back to somebody's parents or getting out into the public. Absolutely. Sure.
Right. Sure. But Bonnie was young. She was, I'm not saying that means this was okay, but she was definitely being influenced by this person. I don't know. It just, as I said, there's just so much that we didn't know at the time that we just now just so wish we'd had a clue, that there could have been a lot different outcome.
Right. Let's move on. The thing is, though, and the tough part about this is that you've gotten a lot of information from the Creeches, specifically Anna Creech, but at least the way I understand it, they're not exactly saints either. We have to remember that even before this $15,000 situation came up, that somebody related to them somehow wanted to kind of, we have to go back to that truck with the title. Tried to scam Bonnie, it seems, out of $2,500 to $3,000. And this was before Bonnie, of course, disappeared. This was before she took the $15,000 out of the bank, etc. Could it be that the Creeches could be possible suspects in Bonnie's disappearance as well? Once again, given what went on before Bonnie disappeared with this title to this truck, and also Mike Creech has had some problems with the law since then. What do you think about that?
let's see if I can say it in an organized fashion. A lot, as you said, a lot of what we know of what happened that last day was per the Creeches. Not all of it, but the money that his sister was trying to borrow was at the same time, within weeks of each other, or literally at the same time as Bonnie was giving this other money to someone else. Which that always leaves the door open to, was someone angry because she would give big money to him, but not little money to them? That sort of thing. I want to say that you asked if they could be a suspect. As far as I'm concerned, everybody she knew could be a suspect. Nothing makes enough sense to say it has to be this person or it has to be that person. It could be anybody until we know all the details. As much as I believe all these things with Snake Christie that led up to that time, I don't know what happened the last day. And I'm leaving that open till we find out more information. Could the Creeches had something to do with it? They could have. I don't know. He was apparently in quite a bit of trouble later, in and out both of jail, as I understand, and charges. I don't know how many times he was charged and jailed, or just, things fell through or whatever. But there was a time a few years ago when the police, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, actually went back and re-questioned Mike Creech, and he was in jail at the time. And at that time, he made the statement that although he was not involved, that he knew where their bodies were, and he gave them a location, and they went and searched that location. And although they found bones, they said that they were animal remains, not human. So does that leave that open to there's more there than we know? Absolutely.
Okay. I guess what I'm trying to show here is that you've gotten a lot of information from the Creeches, who they themselves might have reason to lie. Maybe.
Absolutely.
Maybe. Okay. I just want the listeners to understand that you have got this information, at least some of it, and of course the police have talked to them and everything, but some of this information has come from a couple people who might have reasons to lie. So we have to maybe look at it with a little sideways glance, kind of. Maybe be a little doubtful of it. Maybe there's some truth in it, but there could be some lies in it too. They are not innocent bystanders in all of this. Okay. The father has the suspected, and we're not going to say his name. We wouldn't want to do that. But who you believe to be the father of Bonnie's son, of Jeremy, has he ever come to you to offer any condolences? Has he ever owned up to anything regarding being the father of Jeremy? Anything like that since Bonnie's disappearance 25 years ago? Anything?
He came to our house. He actually and his brother were brought to our house by their mother, who was a friend of mine and is a friend of mine. And after Bonnie disappeared, and she basically brought them, had talked to them about the fact that anything they knew, they needed to tell us. Whether it made them look good, bad, or indifferent, it didn't matter. That if they had any kind of information, we needed to hear it. And ultimately what they said was, that yes, he had a relationship with her, and that was all that they said. They absolutely did not feel that he was the father, but like I said, after that, he fathered another child, so who knows? I don't know. But what I have found recently is that the older brother, Ricky, and his younger brother were later boyfriends or, involved with some of these other people, the Terry McKenzie, another friend that Bonnie had, a girl named Jenny, that there might be way more information there with them than I had known before. And that all they talked about that time was basically, yes, that she had come down there and had a, relationship with them, but that was it. It ended there. But I think I've been trying to reach them. I've been trying to reach a lot of people, but I have trouble. I guess it's been long enough. Phone numbers I find are often no good anymore. And but
right.
I'm going back and trying to question everybody that I can, hoping that one person maybe will give me some information to call another person, to find something down the road.
Right. Right. Okay. So, once again, in your mind, everybody's still suspect. And as we all know, once again, you don't have to be a missing persons expert to know that sometimes couples who have children together, if there are issues, even if somebody's not owning up to be a father, it could be a possibility.
Well, we can't cross anything out.
Yeah, we cannot cross anything out. Right, of course. What has Terry Snake Christie done with his life since 1993? Has he had any run-ins with the law, to your knowledge? Anything? Has he continued to scam women? Have you kept tabs on him? What can you tell the listeners about that?
I don't know.
Don't know.
We just, in general, kept tabs as to where he went. He lived out of state. He lived there at the same house where he was when he was having a relationship with Bonnie, and that property for several more years. And then he moved out of state. And he has, in the last several years, moved back, I believe, into North Florida, and is living up there with one of his nephews and, some family. And as far as I know, he's living an upstanding life up there. But then, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so we don't know if he...
I don't know.
Please.
No, I don't know anything about as far as being run-ins with the place. I don't know.
Okay. All right. We need to ask you about this. You said that Bonnie had these journals / diaries that you read after she disappeared. Anything in there? I'm guessing not. But anything in there that could point anybody in a direction? And those for example, you did say that it seems like there may be some graphic detail in there about Terry and what he was asking Bonnie to do. Did she ever say that she was afraid of him or anything like that? That he was violent with her? Anything like that?
No, not the violence. She did. So I'm trying to think of how to say it. She talked about the fact that she was being asked to do things that she didn't necessarily want to do. She didn't know how to get out of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
That she seemed to be, questioning, or she seemed to know it wasn't the right place to be, but she didn't know how to get out of it.
Yeah. In the diary, if you can say, I realize these are private things, but regarding the disappearance, is there anything that she ever wrote about in there about Terry wanting to start wanting to start a restaurant, or that he had asked for money from her, anything like that?
No, that was from things that she told other people. That wasn't what she wrote about.
She did not write about any of that in her diary. Okay.
I would like to add, if we're still talking about him, that
Please.
At the end, and I think it was her friend Laura, I'm not sure who she told this to, but she told one of her friends that at that moment she was very happy that she, I guess you could say that she had done all the things that he wanted her to do, and that he had promised her that they were going to get married now that she was 18, and that, that she and Jeremy were going to go live with him. And she gave, let's say, enough details that it was a conversation they had in depth. And I don't think there was ever any intention of doing that. And, I just don't know. I don't know where he was going with things, but I don't know.
Yeah. You've mentioned how you've been trying to get in touch with some friends and women who were very young at the time. I've sent you an email in trying to help you out at least a little bit in that area. have any of her friends offered up an opinion, ones that you did get to talk to, maybe some years, maybe at the time, years after Bonnie disappeared? Did they ever offer up an opinion on what they thought happened to Bonnie?
Not really. I mean, everybody just doesn't understand. I mean, I hate to say it, it was the general opinion as far as the ones who knew him, that knew Bonnie and knew of her relationship with him, that he had to be involved with it in one way or another, be it him personally or through some other situation where he was acting for someone else. But there's no proof. There's never been, basically, other than the information we found out about their relationship, there's nothing new has been found out since the very beginning. And so many of the people that knew things, everybody knew a little bit. This person knew this little bit. This person knew this little bit. This person knew something else. And it's been a matter of trying to pull those things together. We tended to feel like there were a lot of things that the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department overlooked or didn't do. But the truth is looking back, and the more we find out things, there were just a lot of things they didn't tell us about. There were a lot of things that they did that we had no idea they were doing. Or, they even went back with the whole cold case, went back over everything they had, looked at new avenues and things, but they won't tell us what they looked at or how they looked at it. So we don't know. So we're kind of like left on our own, just guessing. Yeah. We don't know so many of the hard, true facts. We just don't know them.
Okay. All right. What has this been like since 1993? Let's start here with Bonnie's siblings. She was the oldest one. She had 4 younger siblings. How have they handled this over the last 25 years?
Well, I can tell you that it wasn't good. I can tell you that in one case, one of the children ran away repeatedly, got into lots of trouble, didn't want to be home, didn't want to be around us or anybody to do with any, the family. And it took quite a few years, but his life has totally changed around. And another one that can't remember anything that happened up until basically they were like 18 themselves. And the past is just a total blank. And just things, it's hard to understand, especially with the not knowing. You don't know.
Yeah.
You don't know if they're dead. If they're dead, how did it happen? Every clump of trees that you pass by, could a body be buried there? Everybody is a suspect. You have friends that you knew back in that, for them, and me too, friends. So many of these people all lived within about a half a mile of us. Family, friends, known people you associated with for all of our lives. And now everybody's a suspect. It doesn't do good things to your life. It doesn't do good things to your emotions.
No. You say about not knowing, and I can't tell you how many guests have made that same point on this program publicly. The not knowing part is the hardest. It's the toughest. You can't ignore any scenario, which means you envision everything. You walk it through. Well, what if this happened? And you think of everything extremely graphically. And, every story you hear, you think of it, could this be what happened? From the stray biker gang running through town to, more specific situations. But I don't know. I know that for me personally, to deal with it, you live 2 lives. You have your day-to-day life on one surface, and then underneath, you have all these other thoughts and things going on. And you don't talk about them because to talk about them is to bring it to the surface. But they're there, no matter what. Thoughts are constantly in your head. Yeah. Right. A lot of guests have said the same things, and it all over the United States. In case I've covered in Canada, a lot of parents like yourself have said the same thing. It's just, and as many people know, my mother died recently, and as bad as that is, frankly, parents dying before children is just kind of the way of the world. It's almost the way it's supposed to be. So for a parent to have a child that goes missing, I can't even imagine. I know that I've been in pain in the last month. I can't even imagine how you've gotten through this the last 25 years. I can't imagine it. And I don't have children. So
I don't know if I could say that it's easier to imagine that they were murdered compared to the possibility that they are kidnapped, enslaved, or something, for all these years. But you just, like I said, every possible scenario, you have to think about it.
Right. And then I don't know if this has happened. We haven't really talked about this, Linda, but I know in many of the other cases that I've covered, you hear the rumors about what happened. That this happened, and I know a lot of family members have heard some horrific rumors. I don't believe them, but people, it seems, out there love to create scenarios and rumors and theories about what happened, and it gets back to the family, and that even makes anything worse. I don't know if that's happened in Bonnie's case or not, but then there's scam artists, etc. Only on top of that.
Not the rumors. I don't think everybody I've talked to, it's been more in the line of, I just can't imagine. I just can't imagine what happened. Partly because the deeper dark side, most people didn't know. Very few. And my ex-husband, Bonnie's father, I think it was almost 2 years ago now, received a phone call in the middle of the night. And a young man said, "Oh, this is your grandson, Jeremy. I'm in Las Vegas, and you need to send me some money." And, he didn't believe him that was true. I mean, we've heard of people doing that. But how horrible, to, in the middle of the night, have somebody say that. And the police investigated it. More recently, we had a young man who came to us. And I'm not saying this is a scam. I think this boy totally believed that he was Jeremy. But we did do a DNA test on him, and it was negative. And the reasons that he believed he was Jeremy didn't have any reality in life. I mean, I think he just was a tad bit delusional. Yeah. But, again, the police inspected the situation, and they did not think he was Jeremy either. But it's not, it's not,
mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Exactly no, scam artists, very common. Scam artists are very common. Very common. Linda, do you have a Facebook page or anything set up for Bonnie and her disappearance, some place where I can direct the listeners to go to?
Absolutely. This was actually set up by her best friend, Lori, but there's a Facebook page. The name of it is In Memory of Bonnie and Jeremy.
Okay. And that is a Facebook page. People can go there, like it, share it, see, see pictures of Bonnie, and I'm guessing there's pictures of Jeremy there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Not very many, because we just didn't have very many before he left. But there's lots of pictures of Bonnie in there from the time she was an infant through her growth, and that's thanks to her sister, Jennifer, who went and put all those on. I'm not very good with Facebook. I don't feel very well with it. It doesn't like me. But my daughter, another daughter and Bonnie's friend to watch over it and watch what's put on there and put comments on and everything. So that is definitely an avenue.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm sure the listeners are going to go check that out. And I will be, by the time they're hearing this, our voices I will have directed them in that direction already, and I'll be mentioning it in the tweeting that I do on Twitter, and then of course I do a live show the couple days before the episode comes out as well. So I will be directing them in that direction. Any last words before we complete this interview, Linda?
Just that if there is somebody who hears this from back in that time, that no matter whether they think it's something important or not, just anything they remembered, any story about Bonnie, good, bad, it doesn't matter. Just anything they remember. If they would either go and leave their name and contact information either there on the Facebook page, they could call me. I also have the name of the sergeant with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Department and his phone number, his direct phone number. Any way somebody could reach out would be so very much appreciated.
Linda, why don't you give out the phone number to the sergeant that you mentioned who is handling the case? Why don't you do that, please?
All right. His name is Sergeant Keene, Keene. He is the sergeant over the homicide division. His telephone number is, his direct line is area code 813-247-0595. And he is definitely familiar with the case and with Bonnie and the situations involved in her case.
That's good information to know. That's good that you have particularly the sergeant's phone number, the direct line. That's good. Sometimes people don't have that kind of information. That's good. I'm hoping, being that this is a local Tampa case, I'm hoping once I get back to Florida, Linda, that maybe you and I, and maybe we can get Larry involved, maybe we can meet up sometime, just for lunch. I think that I would enjoy that. I don't get to meet many of my guests in person. I've met a few of them, but not many. Maybe we can make that happen once I get back to Florida.
That would be great. We would look forward to that.
All right, great. Thank you. And I appreciate you being on this episode of Unfound.
Oh, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate not only for myself, but for all the other cases that you put the information out there. And I just hope that for anyone, our case, the others, that somehow somebody, hears this and gives some additional information.
Linda, I think at the age of 48 years old, I think that this is what I am meant to do with my life. I enjoy working with all of you. I enjoy getting to know all of you. I hope I can help in some way, even if it's just a small way, that we can get these cases solved eventually, and I enjoy doing it, and I appreciate the very kind words. Thank you.
And that was my interview with Linda Hirschberger, mother of Bonnie Dages. I appreciate her joining me and all of you on this episode. I also need to thank Bonnie's father, who greatly contributed to my knowledge concerning Bonnie's disappearance. As I was covering Bonnie's case, it reminded me a lot of Ashley Kohler's disappearance, which Unfound covered over a year ago. Ashley was also a young woman who was hiding things, in her case from her mother, that were not found out until after she disappeared. My impression in cases like these is that parents ask, "How didn't we know this?" as if they feel like they've been bad parents. Whereas I try to assure them that they were good parents. Instead, I make sure they understand the reason they didn't know what their sons and daughters were doing is because their sons and daughters didn't want them to know. This is certainly true in Bonnie's case. Yes, she was 18 at the point she disappeared, and she could do whatever she wanted. But I think it's also obvious that there were things she didn't tell her parents, like having a relationship with a guy over 20 years older, because Bonnie didn't want to be given a hard time about it. Not to mention that Bonnie's parents would have quickly figured out that Snake started this thing with Bonnie when she was underage. So there's that. To add to this is Bonnie's conversation with her father when those people tried to get money from her with the title of a truck that didn't exist. Yes, Bonnie did the right thing in talking to her father about it, but my perception is she took the wrong lesson from it. The lesson she should have learned was to always come to her parents if someone wanted money from her. And yes, it seems Bonnie didn't give money to the Creech's relatives, so that was good. But I don't think that stopped Bonnie from wanting to give money to people who asked for it. So what Bonnie took from the conversation from her father was to not go to him again if someone asked for money, because her father would always say it was a bad idea, for very good reason. Then you add in that the man in Bonnie's life asked for money not long after that. Well, she surely wasn't going to say no to him, no matter how strange the meetings and circumstances were. Bonnie certainly couldn't go to her father about Snake asking for money, because that conversation would lead to her father finding out that Bonnie and Snake were an item, something Bonnie had labored to hide. But as I pointed out in the interview, and I know Linda knows this, is the big problem we have is that much of the information Bonnie's family knows about the evening of April 28, 1993, comes from people who are not 100% trustworthy. The Creeches were at least partially involved in trying to get money from Bonnie under false pretenses, the non-existent truck scam. Are we to believe these people who couldn't get money from Bonnie that way just simply stopped? That is a little hard to believe. Not to mention, Bonnie was the Creeches' nanny. But the Creeches didn't own a car. The husband walked to work every day. Well, what kind of family can afford a nanny, but can't own a car out in the back roads of Florida? That sounds overtly odd to me. In addition, the Creeches are paying Bonnie to be at their house. She is an employee. But then Bonnie is allowed to leave not only the Creeches' child, but her own son Jeremy for many hours at a time at night to go see Snake down the road. In fact, it sounds like the Creeches spent more time looking out for Bonnie's son than Bonnie did taking care of the Creeches' child. 4.5-month-olds need attention at night, don't they? Well, how could Bonnie do that if she was down the street with Snake? Did she take Jeremy with her? If so, what kind of nanny situation is that? And I haven't even gotten to the Creeches covering for Bonnie while she carried on this relationship. So, given all of that, I want to ask you a couple questions. Do you think it is a coincidence that Bonnie got that job as a nanny and she got her $50,000 right about the same time in March of 1993? If you don't believe it's a coincidence, then how do you believe the Creeches found out that she was receiving that money? And if you will remember, and this is one last point, Ashley Kohler also lived where she worked. And she ended up living and working for a madam. So knowing that, is it a coincidence that Bonnie also ended up getting involved in some sort of prostitution? You can hear more of my thoughts on Bonnie's case on Patreon for as little as $2 a month. With that, I'll leave the rest of the theorizing up to you. And that's the program. If you found it informative, please go to the app that you use to listen to Unfound and give this podcast a nice review. I thank you for listening. I'm Ed Densel, and you've been listening to Unfound.